Ever wonder how our world got so connected? How you can order something online and have it show up at your door from halfway across the planet? Well, this explainer gets into the incredible story of how one small nation on the edge of Europe became the world's very first global empire, drawing the map that we still use to this day.
Just look at this. This is basically the circulatory system of our modern world. It's this beautiful, complex web of shipping routes carrying everything, from the phone in your hand to the coffee you drank this morning. These are the arteries of global trade. But here's the wild part. The blueprint for this entire network was sketched out centuries ago.
Because just over 500 years ago, this is what the known world looked like to Europeans. You had these huge, empty oceans, unconnected continents. The amazing network we just saw, it just didn't exist. And the story of how we got from this map to that one, well, it all begins with one small Iberian nation, Portugal.
So that's the big question, right? Why them? I mean, out of all the powerful kingdoms in Europe, why did this pretty small country on the Atlantic coast lead the charge into the great unknown? Well, the answer is this unique mix of geography, politics, and just pure ambition.
I mean, just look at their situation on the map. They were essentially cornered. By 1249, they had finished pushing the Moors out and had set their borders. But right next door, you've got the powerful Kingdom of Castile. So expanding on land, yeah, that was pretty much off the table. They literally had nowhere to go except out into the massive, scary, uncharted Atlantic Ocean. The sea was their only way forward.
Okay, for something this huge to happen, you need a visionary, someone pushing for it. For Portugal, that person was Prince Henry the Navigator. Now, he wasn't an explorer himself, he never went on these big voyages, but he was the mastermind, the sponsor, the guy with the vision and the money. He was driven by this powerful combination of religious duty, scientific curiosity, and, let's be honest, a sharp eye for making a profit. He wanted to know, how far down does Africa really go? And the big one, could they find a way to sail to the riches of Asia and cut out all the expensive middlemen?
So with the king's blessing, Portuguese sailors began this incredibly patient, methodical push into the unknown. This wasn't some random one-off voyage. No, this was a project that spanned generations, a century-long effort to map the world one dangerous cape at a time.
And this timeline really shows you just how persistent they had to be. For years, Cape Bochador was this huge psychological barrier. It was literally called the point of no return. Sailors were terrified of it. So when Gil Enos finally sailed past it in 1434, he shattered a mental wall. From there, they pushed further and further, until finally, in 1488, Bartholomew Diaz did the impossible. He rounded the southern tip of Africa. He proved that the Indian Ocean was reachable by sea. But just as Portugal was about to claim its ultimate prize, a huge wrench gets thrown in the works. His name was Christopher Columbus. Sailing for their rival, Spain, he'd just bumped into the Americas, though he thought it was Asia. So to keep from going to war, the two powers did something, well, something completely audacious. They signed the Treaty of Tordesillas, drew a line down the globe, and literally split the entire undiscovered world between themselves. Portugal got everything to the east, which meant their hard-won route to Asia was safe.
Okay, so with the world neatly divided, Portugal launched its most daring mission yet. In 1497, Vasco da Gama set sail, and it was a brutal trip. After 10 grueling months at sea, losing half his crew to scurvy, he finally landed in Calicut, India. He had actually done it. He had opened a direct sea route to the spice markets of the East. And even though he didn't make a ton of money on that first trip, the fact that he made it back alive proved it could be done. And that changed everything. The floodgates were officially open. Just a year after da Gama got back, a second, much bigger fleet set out for India. It was led by Pedro Alvarez Cabral. To catch the best winds, he sailed way out into the Atlantic and basically bumped right into the coast of what we now call Brazil. Now, it's often called an accident, but a lot of historians think the Portuguese already had a hunch there was land out there. And the most important part? It was squarely on their side of that treaty line.
So just think about it. Within a handful of years, the Portuguese have a foothold in Asia and in South America. But the empire they built wasn't a traditional one, with massive land armies conquering territory. It was something totally new, a revolutionary idea for the time, a global empire of trade, built on a network of strategic forts and ports that controlled the world's most valuable sea lanes.
The sheer scale of this thing is hard to wrap your head around.
Imagine a chain of fortified trading posts stretching 14,000 miles. It was a sea-based empire. Instead of conquering vast interiors, they controlled the coasts, the ports, the choke points. They became the gatekeepers of global commerce. They controlled the flow of spices, gold, ivory, and sugar, completely cutting out the old middlemen and funneling all that incredible wealth straight back to Lisbon.
But all of this immense wealth, this golden age, it had a very dark foundation. As they established those trading posts down the coast of Africa, the Portuguese didn't just find gold and spices. They started the long, tragic, and horrifying history of the transatlantic slave trade. It was a system that would fuel their colonies for the next 400 years.
The scale of this human tragedy is just staggering. To get the manpower for the sugar plantations in their new colony of Brazil, millions of Africans were captured and forcibly taken from their homes. Of the estimated 12.5 million enslaved Africans brought to the Americas, a shocking 4.8 million, that's almost 40% of the total, were sent to Brazil. This number represents the brutal engine that drove so much of the empire's wealth.
So for about 100 years, Portugal was pretty much the king of the oceans. But as we know, no empire lasts forever. Its fall wasn't one single event, but more like a slow cracking under the pressure of new rivals, internal problems, and even a literal act of God. The first major blow actually came from a family crisis. The Portuguese king died without an heir, and the king of Spain ended up taking the throne, uniting the two massive empires. This might sound good, but it was a disaster for Portugal, because it dragged him into all of Spain's expensive wars against new, powerful enemies, the English and, most importantly, the Dutch. And the Dutch, who were incredible sailors and merchants in their own right, they saw a huge opportunity. They just systematically started attacking Portugal's trading posts all over the world. For decades, they chipped away at the empire, taking over valuable spots in Indonesia, Sri Lanka, and Africa. Portugal's monopoly on the spice trade was completely shattered. Then, as if things weren't bad enough, on a holy day in 1755, utter catastrophe struck the capital. A massive earthquake, one of the worst in history, followed by a tsunami and raging fires, just completely leveled Lisbon. The heart of the empire was destroyed in a single morning. It killed tens of thousands of people and created a financial and psychological crisis that the kingdom never truly recovered from. The final decisive economic blow was the loss of their crown jewel, Brazil. It's a crazy story. When Napoleon invaded Portugal, the entire royal family fled to Rio de Janeiro. This made Brazil feel pretty important, but when the court finally went back to Lisbon, the king's son, Dom Pedro, just stayed behind. And in 1822, he declared Brazil an independent empire. And with that, Portugal lost its main source of wealth, becoming a shadow of its former glorious self. So for the next century and a half, Portugal clung to its remaining colonies in Africa. But the age of empires was coming to a close, and its final curtain call would come in the 20th century, leaving behind a really complex and, surprisingly, a very long-lasting legacy. The final chapter was messy. A long, costly colonial war in Africa basically drained the country of its money and its will to fight. This led directly to a revolution back home in 1974, the Carnation Revolution, which ended the dictatorship and immediately gave the African colonies their independence. The very last tiny piece of the empire, the trading post of Macau, was handed over to China in 1999, and just like that, the book was closed on 500 years of colonial history. But the empire's echoes are still all around us, and this is probably its most powerful legacy. Today, 250 million people speak Portuguese, making it one of the world's most important languages. Those cultural and linguistic links forged by the empire still connect continents, from Brazil all the way to Angola and Mozambique in Africa.
And that brings us right back where we started, looking at those glowing lines on the map. The sea routes that were first charted by sailors like Diaz and da Gama, who were just trying to find a path to India. Well, they're basically the same routes that these giant container ships travel today. They laid the very foundation of the interconnected world we all live in.
The empire itself is history. It's a story of incredible bravery and discovery, of immense wealth, but also of brutal exploitation and, eventually, decline. But its legacy is everywhere. The globalized world it helped kickstart is now just our reality. And when you look back at its origins, you have to ask yourself, what is the true price and the promise of the connected world we've built?